Are you ready to move on to our next team, which is alphabetically the Houston Rockets? I do not have them with any key free agents. Notable non-guarantees. Jae'Sean Tate has that $1.8 million team option. They have to exercise it by July 7th. They will. That being said, he's also an extension candidate, as is Kevin Porter Jr. and Eric Gordon. They're notable trade exceptions. I only have them. They have a few, but the only one that really is like sizable enough to matter is they have $4 million from the Wood trade, and that doesn't expire until June 24th, 2023. Their best spending tool projects as the non-taxpayer MLE. There are ways that this team could technically open up cap space, but I don't know why you would want to. It just to jump through so many hoops, I'd rather just have that $10 million spending tool, $10+ million spending tool. And what do you have for just their biggest needs and priorities or questions? And I think we're both asking the same thing in the sense that after their draft, which I thought they had, I know everyone had Paolo Banchero going to them at first. I think Jabari Smith is actually the better fit for their roster because of what he's like, his switchability on defense. It should just slide better next to Şengün. But they have Ty Washington. They got Terry Eason. They have 19 players under guaranteed contract if you just assume Jae'Sean Tate is going to be there. And so I think we're both sort of wondering, like, okay, well, where are they shedding some bodies?
Yeah, right. Well, they're a little like OKC that way. I think they had 19 or potentially 19.
They might have had 50.
Yeah, they're all on weird second round partial guarantee. No, I think so. They're obviously the Rockets are a full on rebuilder, but they're also over the cap. And so, like in this situation, sometimes you'd say, well, like this is let's make some moves and take on some bad money multi-year. Like you could shift things around. You might have more flexibility after Wall is bought out. But like they might have 70 million in room next offseason. And I don't think you want to mess around with that by taking on, like a Tobias Harris, or we're getting way out in the weeds, but so their options are even more limited in that regard because it's not a place where you're going to, accumulate draft assets for somebody's bad money. It's certainly not bad multi-year money. I think again, like because they have so many roster spots filled, free agency is kind of not their main focus. They still have to think about how they're going to, move Eric Gordon on at some point, even though I think I've read recently that, they value his leadership and all that stuff, but like
they probably saw that they got a bottom 5 first for Christian Wood. And we're like, well, what are we going to get for 30 something Eric Gordon?
Yeah, suddenly. But do you think that I think Eric Gordon should get more than Christian Wood did just because he fits in more places. Like Christian Wood, I don't know. Dallas, that made a lot of sense, but Christian Wood's not exactly like a plug and play on a contender type of player where Gordon, I think maybe is.
Because I think he's better on defense even at his age, and there's just the downhill juice he provides in addition to the shooting. It's a more like he's a bigger commodity. That being said, like the injury history, even though he was healthy this year, is not great. And I honestly don't know how teams are going to view that second, like the last year of his deal, which is non-guaranteed unless he makes an all-star game or they win the championship. In theory, if you win the championship, you won't care. There are teams that will care. # Phoenix Suns.
Yeah, no, I think so. For their free agency, like I'm just skewing young, assuming they're going to go after anybody. But it's like you look, kind of another second draft type of team. So your Lonnie Walkers, your Jalen Smith, your Bombas, your guy Coffee from the Clippers, I think is someone that
buddy
might look at. But yeah, it's not like you look at this team. It's like, well, what do they need? Because that's just not going to come via free agency. It's going to come as, Jalen Green and Şengün and now I can't think of Jabari Smith. Yeah. The guy who was supposed to go number 1 the entire draft until he didn't. See how that sort of fits together. And then maybe you make some moves at the deadline. That's maybe when Gordon goes, but yeah, free agency. I just, would love to like paint this as a more interesting free agency team, but I'm not sure I see it.
They're more interesting trade team, but for just to throw out for the sake of names and free agency, I thought along the lines of second draft as well. Very quickly though, they have Ty Washington, but would you consider, I know I didn't count him among their key free agents, but would you consider bringing back Dennis Schroeder?
I feel like Schroeder I think Schroeder's getting into that area where it's like, I just don't want him on my team because there's been enough teams that have basically decided that, like, especially ones that are concerned about winning, that like, I don't know. I feel like we sort of know now. So especially if it's a young team where maybe you don't want, and you have some guys like Kevin Porter Jr. that like maybe their professionalism has been in question at points in their careers. Like, I'm not sure you want like a get mine Dennis Schroeder as like a tone setter, but like someone like that, like on court wise, just to sort of be a playmaker and provide a little offense. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I just don't know if he's the guy.
If they're going to have this, but no, if I'm going to, I'd rather just play Ty Washington, Josh Christopher, Kevin Porter Jr., the like Jalen Green, all that ball handling responsibility. I will say if it's someone like a veteran who is either going there because you're like sort of what Daniel Tice did last season, like if DeLon Wright can't get the mid-level exception somewhere else, but Houston is offering the full non-taxpayer, I might consider that just to have like someone with more experience. I don't know, like on the lower end though, who's actually worth maybe then cutting into minutes of some of your younger guys. So, you know, like you're not, I'm like going through the list of free agent point guards. Like if Eric Bledsoe gets waived, like that's not someone you're going to look at. Even Raul Neto, I don't think gives you like enough like mentorship there. Rondo, no. So like if DeLon Wright, yeah, if that was an option, I might consider it. Or even Tyus Jones, if he can't get the mid MLE money, he's only 26. So you can consider that. I had more so just a list off like they're more sort of like wings because that's what this team still feels like it needs. Maybe they're a PJ Dozier team. He's coming off that injury as my voice just cracks there. I don't think they have the touches for him, but just like I want to see him go on a team and play. Kevin Knox, just as sort of a third draft guy at this point. What was the other name that stood out to me the most? I don't know why it's not. I had a third one that wasn't.
Jordan Nwora would make some sense if Milwaukee doesn't have the stomach to match on something, you know, more than the minimum.
Oh, that would be a good one too. I didn't even think of that. But like those are the types of names you already mentioned. Like, oh, Jared Culver. I was like, let's just see Jared Culver. Maybe. Why not? And look, that might be even too rich in the sense that look at all the players they have on this roster. So I have the two questions here to wrap this up is do you think Jae'Sean Tate and or Kevin Porter Jr. get an extension from this team?
I would extend Tate for sure, if only because I hate to like frame everything for the Rockets in this context, but like that's going to be a valuable player that teams are going to want. If you're looking to get some draft assets later, like Tate is he a Josh Richardson special candidate in terms of like the upper end of what they can do for him? I'd hate to put you on the spot, but if you're giving him 10 million plus a year, I think he'd be a value at that contract just because of the defense and maybe you can work out, you know, a little more of an offensive repertoire for him. But I'd be more hesitant on Porter just because I'm not convinced that I'm certainly not convinced he's a point guard.
Right.
I'm also not convinced that he makes a ton of sense next to Green. And I think you do need to start thinking in terms of like who's the optimal Jalen Green like running mate in the backcourt.
For sure.
So I'd make Porter prove it, but Tate, I think I would be interested in keeping around on an extension.
Yeah, and like now that you have Ty Washington there, in addition to Jalen Green, maybe there's not as much of an urgency to extend Kevin Porter Jr. I don't even know, and Rockets fans have some Rockets fans have disagreed with. I'm with you, and I don't think he's like the lead guard. If you want him as a microwave scorer, either in the starting lineup, off the bench, that's the shot creation, the pressure he puts on defense, absolutely huge. Secondary playmaking, fine. I don't know what number I'd be comfortable extending him at, though. Like, I think I would probably land at, if he would sign for between 10 and 12, I might consider it. That does give you a mid-end contract to trade later if you want to. And like you said, they do have cap space next summer. I don't know how valuable that is at this particular stage of their development. And they're also, you know, they got some Brooklyn Nets picks coming down the pipeline that might be pretty flashy as well. So they have to consider that moving forward. The other issue, so you think Eric Gordon, is he on the team to start next season?
I think probably, because if he was going to go anywhere, I think the draft would have been the time to do it. But I would say I don't think he'll be on the team through the deadline. If you're saying next season, like 23, 24. Like,
no, I meant like to start, and then I'll to follow it up. So you think he'll start there, but won't finish this season?
Yeah, because I think if he was going to go this offseason, he would have gone. I imagine all the conversations that they had around Wood were happening in parallel with conversations about trying to move Gordon, and just it didn't happen. So I think they have to move him at some point. Like maybe you get the benefit of him as a leader and like, you know, a guy setting an example for the first half of this year. And then, you know, you decide we have to do this at some point in terms of like where we are as a rebuilding team.
And it's like, I'm almost just wondering like, who are their trade candidates and if you think he's going to be there? I assume he's just going to be gone because I'm looking at, look, John Wall that's going to end in a buyout. Like, unless there's like a trade out there, like, that's going to end in a buyout. And then whoever they acquire for John Wall is probably going to be bought out if they do move him. But like looking at this free agency class, it feels like teams will give up something for Eric Gordon, even if it's not more than what they got for Christian Wood, because what are their alternatives? And you sort of hinted at one that I'd given some thought to is like if Philly's trying to cut, because there's the rumor that Philly is the favorite to sign PJ Tucker, which it can't be unless it has access to the full mid-level exception, which is incredibly difficult for them after making the Melton trade, unless James Harden is either taking like sub $37 million a year, which would be like a $10 million pay cut, or are they flipping Tobias Harris for a smaller amount of salary? And that could be a way of consolidation where it's, are you giving up Eric Gordon and another salary for Tobias Harris, and the Sixers are also compensating you in something, draft equity, whatever, to take on that last year. It feels like something along those lines is going to happen just because they have so many. And look, there are players that they don't need to have. They have, Trey Burke is on their books next season. So like they could just waive some of these guys and not care because they could trade Sterling Brown somewhere or just waive him. But I kind of just feel like given the relative shallowness of this year's free agency class, we're going to see Eric Gordon moved because teams are going to need to take to the trade market to get upgrades.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, they got those 4 guys that came over in the Wood trade that are all on expirings between like 3 and 5 million. So, or less than that. Marquise Chris only makes 2.2. So they got all that, either they're getting waived, bought out, or
and they could just do it's small enough to where you sandwich them all together and it's like, oh, we have $8 million or $10 million in dead money from 1 year. That's not going to matter as much to the Rockets.
Yeah, right.